Hello guys and welcome to my midnight healer preview. There are some insane changes that are happening in the next expansion. I was privileged enough to attend or get to play the alpha version, and this is an extremely early preview. There's a lot of talents that haven't been added. There is still a lot of feedback that Blizzard wants, so keep this in mind. I'm going to try and cover every single healer. I'll talk about some of the big changes, or I feel are big changes. Keep in mind, I probably will miss a lot of things. It's very early on. Some of the tooltips are not even fully updated and anything can change. But this is my preview of the healer changes that are happening in the next expansion. But before I start, I can tell you right now, the consensus is simplification. There is a lot of talents or cooldowns that are being removed or merged together in order to reduce the buttons or the number of buttons you have to press. That is going to be kind of true across the board for all the healers. So whether you like it or not, the expansion or the next expansion in terms of Midnight is looking to be more simple to pick up. Now we're going to start off with Restoration Shaman. There's been a lot of simplification, and this is going to be across the board for a lot of healers out there. So first of all, Healing Surge is no longer here. You have Healing Wave. Now the base cast time has been reduced. A lot of the talents that used to impact Healing Surge are now going to impact Healing Wave. So one less button to have on your action bars in terms of single target casted abilities. In terms of your talents, you'll notice there's a lot of things that are missing. Your Earthen Wall totem, your Ancestral Protection totem is no longer there. Tidal Waves is no longer there. Undulation, Unleash Life are no longer there. And I have to mention this, Cloudburst totem is no longer there either. So there's been a huge massacre of abilities or some passive abilities across the board for a lot of healers, and Resto Shaman is deeply affected by this. And I really want to know your opinion about this, because some people, for example, Cloudburst Totem being gone, they're going to be really happy about it. Some people might be like, hey, Cloudburst Totem added additional complexity. So for example, if you look at totemic reactivity, I just don't see any mentions of Cloudburst Totem, so I'm assuming it's no longer there, but that might change in the future. We have to see. So if you're playing Farseer, I want to talk about some of the changes that happened to Farseer. One of the biggest complaints is healing rate. Healing Rain, casting it every 10 seconds and things like that is just really annoying. A lot of the people in Season 3 are just not even casting Healing Rain. Healing Rain duration has been changed to 18 seconds. So it lasts for a lot longer, and you also have talents like these where it increases the healing done by Healing Rain by 10% and reduces its cast time. So they're trying to make Healing Rain feel like better option for Farseer. Outside of that, we talked about some of the class changes or some of the talents being removed. You don't have Undulation, you don't have Unleash Life, so how the heck do you summon Farseers or your ancestors? Now you're summoning your ancestors by casting Healing Stream Totem. So if I cast my Healing Stream Totem, I'm going to be summoning ancestors right here. In terms of healing cooldowns, you are losing a healing cooldown because now you have to choose between Ascendance or Healing Tide Totem. And this is not something that's specific to Resto Shaman. A lot of other healers are getting the same kind of choice between one cooldown or the other. So Blizzard is trying to reduce the amount of cooldowns that healers have, which is their mentality going into Midnight, which we'll have to test and see how it feels. How do you feel about these Resto Shaman changes so far? The deep pruning. I mean, this is deep pruning of Resto Shaman. Do you think it's good, or do you think it's something that should be wary of? Now let's talk about Restoration Druid. And again, there has been pruning of abilities, talents, and all those things. You no longer have Scenario Ward. You don't have Undergrowth in terms of double life blooms anymore, but you do have talents like, for example, Life Treading, where it replaces Efflorescence, and Efflorescence healing is increased by 30%, and it now automatically grows beneath your Life Bloom's target's feet. So if I press Life Bloom, I'm also casting Efflorescence underneath the person, which basically removes one ability from my action bars. Again, in line with everything that I've been saying in terms of simplifying healers. Another form of simplification in terms of removing buttons, and some of them I actually think it's actually pretty good. Now, first of all, Flourish has been baked into Tranquility. You have to choose here. Tranquility extends the duration of all of your heal overtime effects by 2 seconds. So that is baked underneath Tranquility in terms of the spec tree. Some people might like this, some people are not gonna like this. Again, it really depends. What I kind of like is the fact that Grove Guardians is no longer a separate button. Instead, it is a passive. Casting Swiftman, the Wild Growth summons a treant that causes that casts Nourish on the target or a nearby ally, periodically healing for a certain amount. So if I cast Swiftman, I'm going to spawn Grove Guardian. If I cast Wild Growth, I'm going to spawn a Grove Guardian. It is no longer a button to press, which I actually think is a better thing, because I think Grove Guardians, especially for Wildstalker, almost feels like a chore, but that is my personal opinion. Again, A lot of simplification, a lot of baking in of your existing cooldowns into passive abilities. There's also something else that I noticed, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to include in the video because I'm not certain if it's going to go live the way that it is. But in Resto Druid class 3, you'll notice there's no Skull Bash. Now, if you go to Feral, if you go to Guardian, Skull Bash is there. If I go to Spellbook and type in Skull Bash, it is here, but it's grayed out and I can't drag it on my bars or anything like that. And I'm not sure if Blizzard is actually removing Skull Bash for Resto Druids, which means you won't have intro as Resto Druid. Maybe they're replacing it with something else. I definitely need to test it a bit more, but I think it's worth noting. Blizzard is also trying to combine some of these talents. If you look at Soul of the Forest, Swiftmint increases the healing of your next regrowth or rejuve. It no longer impacts wild growth, and Power of the Archdruid, Soul of the Forest, now causes your next rejuvenation or regrowth to apply to 2 additional allies within 20 yards. I think Blizzard is trying to create a more meaningful choices when it comes to Soul of the Forest. We'll have to see how that's going to work out, but let me know how you feel about this very initial look at Resto Druid. Now let's talk about Preservation of Evoker, and honestly, they received some insane changes, and I really want to know your opinion about this because there is a lot. First of all, Spirit Bloom is no longer here. Emerald Communion is no longer here. Dream Breath has a 40-yard range. That's the only thing that, at least based on my testing that I've seen so far, that's the only thing that has 40-yard range so far. They didn't make, for example, your Chrono Flames or Living Flames longer range. They didn't make your other things. It's just Dream Breath. And I think there is specific reason because, first of all, look at what they're doing to Flame Shaper. Flame Shaper Engulf is no longer here. Instead, you have this thing here with Legacy of the Lifebinder. Dream Breath gains an additional charge. So how do you do your ramps? Look at Consume Flame. Consume Flame is triggered from Verdant Embrace or Emerald Blossoms. Verdant Embrace healing consumes 4 seconds of Dream Breath from allies it heals, detonating it and healing them for 200% of the amount consumed. Or Emerald Blossoms, healing consumes 2 seconds of Dream Breath from the allies it heals, detonating it and healing them for 200% of the amount consumed. There is a decent amount of emphasis on Emerald Blossoms. So I think Blizzard is trying to make Emerald Blossoms more of a thing for Pres Evoker. Now, in terms of some of the talent choices, you'll see something very similar that I talked with previous healers. You have to choose between some of your cooldowns. Do you choose Dreamflight here, or do you choose Stasis? Again, in my eyes, Stasis is something that is identity defying for Preservation Evoker. I can never see myself playing without Stasis, but there are certain or cool talents out here. For example, here, this talent right here, Verdant Embrace healing is increased by 40%. In addition, it no longer causes you to leap to the target. So one of the biggest causes of deaths for new players coming into World of Warcraft as Preservation Evoker is pressing Verdant Embrace for something like a tank, being teleported or flying to the tank and then standing in a swirly and then you're dying and then you're never using Verdant Embrace on other people but instead on yourself. Now, if I press Verdant Embrace on a tank, for example, it's going to shoot out this like mirror image type of thing. I'm not going to fly towards this, and I think that's a big quality of life. Those are some of the other talent changes. You'll notice Inner Flame is coming back from Season 3 in the form of a new talent, and I think that's actually pretty cool because it is, or it can be interesting to play around, but let me know how you feel about it. I'm not going to go through all the new talent changes or talents that are being introduced because this is just a quick overview of every healer. If you like this video, like and subscribe. I'm going to be doing an in-depth video for each healer once the talents are more concrete, but there is a huge change before I'm going to leave Preservation Evoker right now. Life binds cannot be echoed anymore. So if I press my Temporal Anomaly and I press my Verdant Embrace on this mage, I only get life bind on myself and the mage and not the other people. And that is an absolutely huge simplification of Preservation Evoker because life bind can be used both in Mythic Plus and raids in multiple different ways depending on the damage patterns. So guys, let me know how you feel about massive changes to Preservation Evoker. Do you think it's interesting? How do you feel about the possibility of Emerald Blossoms being a bit more of a thing because there's quite a few changes around this as well? And now let's talk about Mistweaver Monk, and we're not going to talk about all of the talent changes because there's quite a few, but if you look at the talent tree right now, there is a noticeable talent or notable talent that is missing in this case, and that is a Jadefire Stomp is no longer here, and I'm assuming that Blizzard just didn't like the positional requirements. By removing Jadefire Stomp, it means that it's going to be easier to play. You don't have to play around Jadefire Stomp anymore. If you have talents like Jadefire Teachings, it seems like this is active all the time, even though the tooltip says 15 seconds. You also have a choice here between Way of the Serpent, where Soothing Mist and Cracking Jade Lightning may be channeled while moving, but movement speed is reduced by 40% while channeling. And then you have a choice here with Way of the Crane. This used to be known as Awakened Jadefire, I believe. Tiger Palm strike twice, Blackout Kick strikes an additional 2 targets at 20% effectiveness, and Spinning Crane Kick heals 3 nearby allies for 120% of the damage done. You don't have to stand in Jade Fire Stomp anymore for that. You choose between, again, this is my opinion, Blizzard is trying to give you multiple different ways of playing Mistweaver Monk. Do you want to have a bit more of that ranged, or do you want to have a bit more of that melee? And you have to make a choice. For example, right here, I can cast Soothing Mist while I'm moving. Again, my movement speed is reduced, but I can do it if I want, or if I pick this talent. Another very interesting change for Mistweaver Monk is going to do with Shannon's Gift. So look at what Shannon's Gift is doing. Look at the tooltip. Replaces Vivify. You no longer have Vivify if you press or talent into Shannon's Gift. I also have Veil of Pride here. I could be speccing into this talent right here, where allies healed by Shannon's Gift received 1% additional healing from all sources for 15 seconds per cloud of mist consumed. I'm also speccing into Legacy of Wisdom, where Shannon's Gift heals 2 additional allies, or I could spec into Emperor's Favor. So I could change how my Shannon's Gift operates, because considering right now, I can just spam Shannon's Gift without having any clouds active. And based on the talent build that I have right now, I'm just doing AoE healing. Or maybe I could make a decision completely that I don't want Shannon's Gift at all. I could spec away from Shannon's Gift, and now I just have my normal Vivify, where I can spread my Renewing Mist and I can use my Vivifies, and they're going to do cleave healing because of Invigorating Mist. And you have to read Invigorating Mist right now, because Vivify heals all allies with your Renewing Mist active for a certain amount. There is no reduced beyond 5 targets type of mentality here. So based on how Blizzard is going to tune that, I think they want you to make choices between, do I want to play with Shannon's Gift? Do I want to emphasize single target? Do I want to emphasize AoE? Or do I just want to play around that Renewing Mist, Vivify type of thing? And again, we'll have to see how the tuning is going to work out. Outside of that, in terms of some of the simplification, in terms of gameplay, if you look at Red Crane right now, GG, you'll see here that GG presence makes you immune to movement impairing effects. That's nothing new. Makes Enveloping Mist instant cast and reduces mana cost Enveloping Mist by 20%. You no longer have to play this stacking game or get stacks to reduce the cast time of your Enveloping Mist. You press your Red Crane and you can just spam instant cast Enveloping Mists. So that is purely a simplification of that kind of gameplay. Again, let me know how you feel about this. Let me know how you feel about all of these changes, or some of these changes for Mistweaver Monk. There's a lot of things that I didn't cover that I'll cover in my future videos. So now let's talk about Holy Paladin. And again, like with all the other healers, there's been some pruning. Blessing of Seasons is no longer here, or at least I can't find it. Some people might like that, some people might not. It really depends. There's been a lot of talents with absorbs. So if I type in absorb, you'll notice new talents like Beacon of the Savior, where every 5 seconds and when Beacon of Savior transfers to a new injured target, they are granted an absorb shield that prevents a certain amount. If you look at things like Glistening Radiance, while at maximum health, targets with Beacon of Light generate an absorb shield equal to 1% of their health every 3 seconds. Veneration gives you an absorb now. Hammer of Wrath grants an absorb shield on up to 5 injured allies. And again, there's a new talent here that also, Word of Glory and Light of Dawn, grants allies an absorb shield equal to 10% of their healing. A decent amount of absorb talents being added to Holy Paladin. You'll probably also notice that in the class tree, Holy Prism has been moved here as a talent choice node with Divine Toll. Of Dusk and Dawn has been removed. This is actually the same across the board for a lot of the healers. They're trying to remove a lot of these auras that you might have to track. Again, part of the simplification. But honestly, one of the biggest changes in terms of visually as well is going to be Light of Dawn. Look at my Light of Dawn right now. It's no longer a cone. It's basically heal around you. And it doesn't have a player cap anymore. The healing is reduced beyond 5 targets. And I think that's going to be a pretty decent quality of life. Again, just look at the way that it looks like. I think it's really cool. We'll have to see how it's going to be tuned. They're also trying to give Aura Mastery a bit more of an oomph with talents like Ringing of the Heavens, where activating Aura Mastery also causes a Divine Toll at 100% effectiveness. And honestly, it's very much needed, because after pressing Aura Mastery, I think it needs that additional impact straight away, and I think that's a good change. In terms of some other talents, you'll notice Call of the Righteous, where Avenging Wrath cooldown is reduced by 30 seconds, but its duration is also reduced. So basically, Blizzard, again, if you picked Wings, you can see here the cooldown is 1.5 minutes. Blizzard is giving you an option of, hey, would you rather have Wings a little bit more often, but for a shorter duration? Purely dependent on the damage patterns, but at least they're giving you more options. And you'll see this across the board. For all the healers out there, they're trying to change some of the buttons that you might have to click, and they're making it into passives or triggered by other things. Tears Deliverance is now triggered or activated from Avenging Wrath, in the same way that Hand of Divinity is also activated by Avenging Wrath. And that is, again, across the board for a lot of healers. Let me know how you feel about these Holy Paladin changes. Let me know especially how you feel about the Light of Dawn. I have to do it again. The Light of Dawn circular healing. And now let's talk about Holy Priest. And again, there has been some removal of talents and things like that. You don't have Renew anymore. Even though you can proc Renew by some of the talents, you don't have Renew as a usable ability. You don't have Heal anymore, and you'll notice Lightweaver has been updated to not have Heal portion. You don't have Symbol of Hope. You don't have things like Lightwell. So there's a lot of buttons that have been kind of taken out. There's been a simplification for Oracle. You don't have premonitions. You don't have the cycling ability that you can cycle through. Instead, Prayer of Mending gains an additional charge. You can still spec into things like Piety, where 20% of overhealing done is redistributed on up to four nearby injured allies. You can see there is a decent amount of simplification when it comes to Holy Priest, when it comes to Oracle Holy Priest, and there's been a lot of emphasis in things like Prayer of Mending, especially with Oracle. There's also been a lot of changes made to the class tree. There's been quite a few new talents. There's been, again, reshuffling. I'm not going to cover all of them because there's a lot, and I think it was very much needed. We'll have to see in the future testing whether that's a good or a bad thing. Also, as a Holy Priest who's picking Archon, you'll notice that Halo has been moved from your class tree into the Archon hero build, which honestly is probably more suited towards that hero build in terms of its identity. And if you want to reduce the amount of buttons you have even further, for example, you have Holy Word Sanctify, which is going to be used for AoE healing. You have Holy Word Serenity for single target healing. Well, you can actually remove one of those. So if you spec into Ultimate Serenity, it's going to replace Holy Word Sanctify. So now increases the healing done by Holy Word Serenity by 10%, causes it to heal 4 nearby injured allies within 46 yards, which is not really nearby, for 15% of its healing done. Talents that affect Holy Word Sanctify instead affect Holy Word Serenity. So if I spec into this, my Sanctify is going to be gone. It's going to become a passive thing, which I don't have to click. I don't have to do anything with it. You can see it right here. And my Serenity is now going to have additional value. It's also going to do spread healing, especially if people are not grouped up. So if I click it, it's going to do healing for people nearby. Again, the range is quite big. And now finally, let's talk about Discipline Priest. And Discipline Priest has lost some of the talents. For example, they don't have Shadow Covenant anymore. They don't have Schism anymore. And Blizzard is trying to build up your other abilities in terms of Mind Blast, in terms of Penance, in terms of Shadow Lord Pain. You'll notice talents like here, where Mind Blast deals 150% increased damage, but costs 40% more mana. You'll notice talents, somewhat passive talents like here, Shadow Damage and Healing Done is increased. Each successive penance bolt during the channel deals 5% increased damage and healing. There's been talents like Shadow Mend added. I think one of the bigger changes that happened to Discipline Priest, and that's probably going to be huge in terms of raid, in terms of spreading atonements and all that, is going to be the new Evangelism. And look at this. Immediately Power Word Radiance your target at 100% effectiveness, and cause Power Word Radiance to have no cooldown and 40% reduced mana cost for 10 seconds. So if you need to apply atonements in raid content and you're behind because you didn't know there was a damage pattern happening on anything like that, your Evangelism is applying atonements because the Radiance, you're spamming your Radiances, you're applying atonements. I mean, this is kind of wild. This is like a cheat code in terms of applying as many atonements as possible during those raids, especially during raids. So they're trying to simplify atonement application during raids, at least in some way. And on top of that, they're also doing some really substantial changes here, and this is going to require a lot of testing. So if you look at atonements, if you look at the previous iteration of atonements, they might say like, hey, healing is increased by this amount when outside of raids. Instead, you'll notice here, your spell damage heals all targets affected by atonement for 60% of damage done. Healing is reduced when healing more than 5 targets. So this will most likely have some impactful meaning, and we'll have to test this, because in my eyes, Blizzard is trying to give you strong 5-man healing even when you're in raid, and then obviously heal is reduced when healing more than 5 targets, and we'll have to see how much reduced and all those things. So possibly a lot of scaling things that need to be changed here. So in terms of Discipline Priest, again, we talked about you no longer have Shadow Covenant, you no longer have Schism, actually no longer have Luminous Barrier from what I've seen here, so you don't have those to pick from. You do have a much easier way of applying atonements through Evangelism, which I think actually feels really, really powerful right now, and there's been power baked into your other abilities which again, let me know how you feel about this version of Disciplined Priest. And to finish off this video, keep in mind this is extremely early preview. There's probably a lot of things that are not going to make it into live versions. Blizzard wants to know your feedback. They're doing some really big changes. They're removing some really, in some cases, really loved abilities that people are going to be honestly scared about losing. So please, if you have any feedback and things like that, make sure to provide your feedback on forums. Let me know how you feel about the changes. Again, I am getting a lot of things wrong here because some of the tooltips are not even working properly. Some of the spells are not implemented yet. There's a lot of abilities that are going to be added in later versions of alpha and beta and all those things. But how do you feel about the initial approach of Blizzard's healing mentality? It's very clear that Blizzard is trying to simplify the specs. They're either removing or baking in 2 abilities into 1, or just removing abilities outright. They're trying to remove some of the tracking that you need to do in terms of buffs, in terms of different procs. And I haven't checked other specs or DPS or tanks. I'm sure they're doing something similar to them as well, but let me know how you feel about that. And if you like this video, please like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel, and I'll see you in my next video.